Hello everyone, my name is Mindy Gower and this is my Module 8 for EDL 853. This module consisted of completing a case study, and the case study is titled, Get This Child Out of My Room. I'm going to start with a summary about the case study. So what I first learned is that Susan Green is freshly graduated out of college and she just received her first job as a special education teacher at a K-12 school. In this school, there's also a third grade student named Carl Hughes, and he is already on an IEP for his behavior. I also come to find out that 3 months ago, his parents were just recently divorced. Carl's general education teacher is Mrs. Taylor, and she expressed to Susan Green that Carl is showing aggression towards her ever since his parents have gotten divorced, and she wants him to be out of the room. However, Mrs. Green worked together with the special education coordinator of the school and the superintendent to come up with an intervention plan to have Carl removed from the situation when he becomes aggressive. And so that is my summary of this case study. Let's get started with what I know. So I know that Susan Green is freshly graduated from college. She just received her first special education job at the K-12 school. The school is in a rural community that relies heavily on cooperative systems for their resources. Carl Hughes, he is the third grade student in this case study. He is on an IEP, as I mentioned, for his behavior, but lately he's been showing aggression towards his teacher. Mrs. Taylor is Carl's general education teacher, and she is very worried for her safety as well as her students' safety. So she went on to talk to Mrs. Green to get Carl out of her classroom. However, that is not the solution that came about. So let's keep going. This is another slide about what else do I know. I know that Mrs. Taylor expressed her concern to Mrs. Green. I know that Mrs. Green set up a meeting with a special education coordinator and superintendent. They worked together to create an intervention plan for Carl, but once they came up with that intervention plan, they set up an IEP meeting with Carl's parents, and during that IEP meeting, Carl's mother became very, very emotional and told them to do whatever, and she signed the papers and left. However, what was left of the meeting, as Mrs. Taylor was walking out, she grumbled and moaned under her breath, saying that when Mrs. Lewis was here, she would have just taken the problem kid out of class, put them in detention, and gave them with a workbook. So it asked what I would do in this situation, and honestly, I think that Mrs. Green was in the right, and Mrs. Taylor was in the wrong. What do I need to know? Okay, so there are a couple of different things that I need to know to go about completing this case study. I need to know, what does Carl's current behavior management look like? What are his past experiences with the school? What triggers him? Is there certain things that are triggering him that we haven't seen? And does Carl receive counseling services? Is there someone that talks to him on a daily or even a weekly basis? I also need to know, what strategies has Mrs. Taylor used in the general education classroom, and has she documented those? I also need to know, have administrators been notified about the situation? We know that Mrs. Green has talked to the administrator, set up an intervention plan, but did Mrs. Taylor talk to any administrators before that? What policies are put into place? And do we have any witnesses of this behavior besides Mrs. Taylor? Is he just doing it in her room? And do the teachers have proper training for this type of situation? Those are a lot of different things that I need to know to figure this case study out. So now I'm going to go on and identify the problem. Okay, so we all know that Carl has become aggressive and disrupting class and making Mrs. Taylor feel very uncomfortable. Mrs. Taylor sees only one solution to the problem. She wants Carl out of her class, and that is it, and that is that. But I believe that Carl just needs guidance. He needs attention. He has a lot of different things going on at home, and he's just lashing out at school. So we need to put his needs first, figure out what we can do so that he can stay into the general education classroom. Category 2, my proposed plan of action. Okay, so what I would first like to do is to set up meetings to hear everyone's different side of the story. For example, I want to talk about Mrs. Green. What can I do to help you enforce this intervention plan? I want to talk to Mrs. Taylor and remind her about her responsibilities and to help her have an open mind about Carl. Yes, I would be upset, and I am upset that Carl is showing this aggressive behavior towards her, but we need to have an open mind, step back, and see what is best for Carl. I'm also going to talk to Carl. I'm going to tell him and explain the expectations that I have at this school. I'm going to let him know that I care and support about him, but this behavior that we have right now that he's showing is not okay. After talking and discussing with everyone in a meeting and listening to their sides of the story, I would like to meet with the superintendent and discuss the policies that are in place, and I'm going to communicate those policies amongst my staff. Once all that is completed, next I'm going to implement the intervention plan. I'm going to support everyone involved in this plan: Carl, Mrs. Green, and Mrs. Taylor. Above all that, I'm going to be in the classroom. I'm going to evaluate how the intervention plan is going. I don't just want to be hearing about it. I want to see it happening. And I'm also going to provide professional development opportunities for my staff and for my teachers. Category 2, this is the strategies for my implementation. I want to communicate with my team members. Keeping everyone updated on the same page is the key to success. I'm going to document the strategies utilized and the outbursts that he has. What triggers him? I really want to know that. And I'm going to observe Carl in the classroom and outside of the classroom. See how he is in both settings. And then I'm going to go ahead and assess the implementation plan. Category 3. Resolve the issues based on promoting the success of all students. So what is best for the students? I said what is best for the students is listening to everyone's side of the story and gathering information before I decide what my next step is going to be. I'm going to educate Carl in his least restrictive environment. I want to give Carl the best education possible. Every single one of my kids deserves that, and so does he. Even though he is showing this new behavior, we have to take a step back and see what we can do to help him out. I want to keep him around his peers if he can be safe and if he can do the right things. This is a new behavior, so is it because his parents just got divorced? We need to take a step back and figure out why he is doing this new behavior. I'm going to hold him accountable for his actions. I'm going to document and keep data for what is going on so that we don't have to make a huge jump from the general education classroom to the special education classroom. Carl needs to be a top priority. Category 3, this is the resolution. There is no data at all to suggest that Carl should not be in the regular education classroom. Yes, he is showing an aggressive behavior. Yes, that is not the right thing to do. However, it is a new behavior. We need to take a step back, like I've said multiple times, assess the situation, figure out what we can do so that he can still gain and receive the best education that we can give him. Students and their learning are our #1 priority. It is very evident that Carl is having very rough home life issues right now, and this behavior that he is exhibiting is new. So if we can help him cope with what is going on at home, maybe he can turn into a completely different kid. Category 4, debrief the problem. My thoughts, feelings, and values about this case study. I definitely believe that teamwork was lacking in this situation. Yes, Mrs. Green worked with other people. However, it needs to be a whole team collaborating together, focused on the needs and the rights of Carl. And I just feel like that was very lacking in this situation, especially with Mrs. Taylor. She needs to have an open mind about that. Also, I feel like Mrs. Green needs support to be able to continue to make tough decisions. She did a really great job of being a first-year teacher and just going with what she knows is right. And a thought that I have, or a concern, is there anything else that can be done to meet Carl's needs? Are we doing everything that we can to help him meet the best education that he can get? Unresolved issues. A couple unresolved issues that I believe are still there are like, what strategies were utilized? Were there success in the implementing strategies? What didn't work with implementing strategies? I need to know that, okay? And what past experience has Carl had at home and school? We really just need to go back, break apart what has been happening, take in all the data, document everything, and try to figure this out. And I'm also wanting to support Mrs. Green in this situation because as a first year teacher, she's taken a big leap and she's doing a great job of it. Category 5, reflect on Standard 2. Component 1. How did you, as educational leader, promote the academic success of every student by enhancing instructional capacity? I did this by having open lines of communication with every single person involved. I listened to Mrs. Green, Mrs. Taylor, Carl, and his parents before I decided what we should do next. I supported my staff, Carl, and his parents. Supporting everyone in this situation is definitely going to be needed. And I also held Carl accountable for his actions. He can't be aggressive and get away with it. He needs to know that that's not okay, and I'm going to let him know my expectations for him. Component 2. How did you, as the educational leader, promote the personal well-being of every student by enhancing instructional capacity? Well, I did this in a variety of different ways, but it was kind of similar to the first component. I listened to every side of the story. I collaborated with staff, parents, and students, and I showed that I cared for everyone involved before I made a decision about what we were going to do. I showed support for Mrs. Green, and this is definitely going to help her continue to make hard decisions now and in the future, and that is something that I need to have in my educational system. I was also an active presence in Mrs. Taylor's room. This is going to make Mrs. Taylor feel more comfortable. It's going to make her students feel more safe, and she will feel more supported with me as an active presence in her classroom. Component 3. How do you as a school leader enhance instructional capacity? Well, I created opportunities for my teachers and staff to collaborate. I think that is very, very important, especially in the educational world. I offered professional development opportunities, and I'm going to be an open resource. I want my staff and my students to be able to come to me, and I'm going to share my knowledge with them. Overall, this was a great case study to complete. Honestly, I know that this is a situation that can happen to me right as I become a school leader. And so completing this was very beneficial because now I know what I can do. Thank you.